Okay, so your first Illustrator assignment is more of a um, shorter exercise than it is to create, a believable image or anything like that. So the idea here is that you are going to take a logo and completely modify it in Illustrator. So here's the original Batman logo that I'm going to be using. Here is the result. Um, Basically, the difference between these two. This is the JPEG that I found online, so it's just a normal photo, and this is now a vector Illustrator image. And what that means is if I zoom in over on the logo, the original logo, you can see it's still pixels, still very pixelated. Looks okay when we're zoomed out. Definitely gets pixelated as we zoom in. Over here, though, no matter where I go in the image, it's a perfectly crisp line, and these are basically separate little objects that can be manipulated. We can change the color of them, we can change the shape of them and size, and we lose all pixels. So basically, no matter how far I zoom in, uh, there are no pixels at all. So what we do when we do this technique is we're losing photorealism. So we kind of lose the ability to do sort of believable collages and whatnot. But what we gain is a much more crisp and clear image that is infinitely scalable, meaning no matter how large we blow this up, if we were to print this on a business card or a t shirt or a billboard, it's going to be just as crisp and clear as it is here. If we were to blow the Batman logo up, the original one, it's going to look pixelated, just the way it is with a JPEG image. So let me show you how we're going to do this. Um, First thing is we're going to open up Illustrator and create a new file that is just a standard a standard kind of screen size. Right here, I just by when I open Illustrator, there's a 1920 by 1080 pixel. This is just like a generic size, a screen resolution size, which is pretty good for working on these kind of images for now. If you don't see that there, just go to File, New, and we're going to make it 1920 by 1080 pixels. Definitely make sure that you change this to pixels, not don't leave it on inches or anything else. And then over here, you're just going to have to manually type in 1920 for the width and 1080 for the height. Leave everything else exactly the same, and you're basically going to get this blank canvas to work on. Incidentally, it is no longer called a canvas like it was in Photoshop. So the area of your image is now called an artboard. Not anything you have to worry about this second, but that's what it's called. So you're not going to see anything referring to rotate canvas or anything like that in Illustrator. Everything that sort of deals with your entire image is going to be called an artboard. Couple of things we're going to need to do first. First, we're going to save this. I'm just going to do File, Save As. This is going to be called my last name underscore logo. It wants to save it as an Illustrator file, which is going to be .ai, which is just stands for Adobe Illustrator. It wants to it wants to force us to save it as an Illustrator file. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want to do. I'm just going to click Save. Leave everything the same here. You don't want to change anything. Just go ahead and click OK, and now we're ready to go. Two other things you're going to need to do when you first open Illustrator. It is set to the Essentials sort of desktop, I guess you could say, or that's the workspace that it's called. Essentials is very essential. Like there's not a lot of icons and things. We need to go to Essentials Classic. Essentials Classic, you're only going to need to do this once, but once you do that, we start to have more options up at the top and along the right, and some more tools showed up as well. Very important because some of the things that we need to use will not show up in Essentials. We need to go to Essentials Classic instead. Then we're going to open our logo. So you're going to go to the internet, find any logo that you want, download it to your computer. Mine's just right here on the desktop. And I'm just going to drag that into Illustrator, which then will open it in a new tab. So I'm just going to go to Illustrator and drop it here. It's opening it in a different tab. It's not in the actual logo that I've created. So once we do that, you can just select the object. Your selection tool, which is very much like the move tool in Photoshop, is the default tool that's selected, and all you have to do is click on the logo. You can see you can move it around like you can when you have the move tool in Photoshop, and you're just going to copy it, and then come back to your file here and paste it. Then you're going to paste it again, and the reason is you want to have a copy of your logo that is unaltered, and now we're going to have the one that we will be working on here. So basically, copy it once, paste it twice. So this image is, again, it is a JPEG. We'd have to zoom in to see that, which reminds me, just like we had to do in Photoshop, the navigator, which is the logo over here, the little option that's going to allow us to zoom in and out, is not on display. So we're going to have to go to Window, Navigator, and that pops the navigator up. If it's sort of floating over here, like if it's just sort of floating in space when you open it up, that's fine. But you can click and kind of drag it up here, and if you notice, it all kind of highlights blue back here, and I can put it wherever I want. So I'm just going to put it there, and now the logo is there for me to click on. It doesn't have the little slider at the bottom like the navigator on Photoshop. You actually have to click on the big mountains to zoom in, the small mountains to zoom out. But again, I'm just going to zoom in and show you this is definitely pixelated. Just because we opened it in Illustrator doesn't mean that it automatically turns it into the vector that I was talking about before. If you double click on the hand tool over here on the left side in your toolbar, that's always going to zoom in or out so that your image goes full screen, just like it did in Photoshop. So now I'm going to enlarge this a little bit. These are kind of small, floating inside this space. This is fine, but the one we're working on, we want to be larger. If you choose your selection tool, the black selection tool, and click on your logo, to get this thing larger, you have to hold the shift button while you grab a corner and drag the image larger. If you don't hold the shift button, this will happen, and your image will change in proportion. Unfortunately, it's not like Photoshop where you can just click and drag once you have free transform going on and call it a day. You have to hold shift. You have to get it to the size you want. You have to let go of your mouse first, and then you can let go of the shift button. Otherwise, again, the thing could look kind of wonky. If that happens, just edit, undo, and try again. So also, this might be the case where once you paste your image into Illustrator, it might be bigger than the artboard that we have made here. If that's the case, zoom out and make it smaller to fit the size of our artboard. And I'm just trying to make it so that it's something like this. We can always change the size of this later as well. Okay, so the selection tool, the black selection tool, I'm going to make. I have to differentiate that from the white selection tool, which is called the direct selection. We'll be using that here in a second. But basically, I'm going to select this image just by clicking on it. To turn it into a vector, we're going to do what's called image trace. And when I mouse over it, it says it converts the image to a tracing object, which is fancy word for a vector. The thing is, when I click image trace, this happens. The logo, or the image, gets turned into a black and white graphic. Every color there that was darker than mid-gray, than perfectly mid-tone gray, gets turned black. Everything lighter than that gets turned white. If your logo that you're using is like all very light colors, it actually could disappear completely. You might not see some or part of your logo at all, but that's going to change here in a second. Even though it's not, some of these colors might not be visible yet, we can get them back. But to prove my point, before we do something different here, I'm going to zoom in and show you now that this is a vector. Everything is crisp. There are no pixels at all, regardless of how far I zoom in. So image trace turns it into a vector. However, we need to do some other things now to get our colors back. How many colors were in your original logo? That's kind of important. So the idea is that, first of all, you choose a logo that is solid colors, that doesn't have that doesn't have any gradients inside of it. So it should just be solid colors to begin with. How many colors was my Batman logo? Well, the logo itself is basically 2 colors. It's black and yellow, and then there's another black ring. But this is a square image. The image itself has white around the outer edge. That counts as one of the colors. So technically this image is not a 2-color image, it's 3. It's black, yellow, and white. So if I want to get my colors back the way they are, I need to turn this back into a 3-color image. How do we do that? Well, once you have selected your image and chosen to image trace it, there's this little box here called the image trace panel. When you click on that, it opens this little box up, and now we can choose different presets as far as colors and other kind of styles. So right here where it says default, that is the normal preset that just automatically happens when you image trace an object. The default is a black and white logo. But look, there are some other options here. High fidelity photo, shades of gray, and we have several different color options as well. I happen to have 3 colors. That's exactly what I need: my yellow, my black, and my white. So I'm just going to click on that, and I'm going to wait for it to apply. Now you can see my colors have returned. If your logo is more than 3 colors but less than 6, or more than 6 but less than 16, if it's a number that's not here, you're going to just change the number of colors after the fact. You can choose any of these color modes. Once it traces, just click right in here and type in the number of colors that you need to get all of your colors back. Once we do that, we don't really need this image trace to be open anymore. So basically all that did was change the colors back to the original colors that were there. Now, how do we manipulate this image? So we can't really do much to this thing. I can't even change I can't like customize these colors. If I wanted the bat in the middle to be blue, I can't do that yet. The only thing I still can really do now is like, you know, change the scale or rotate it, which you can do just by mousing outside of the outer edge of the box, just like you can do that, just like you can do in Photoshop. And that's about it. We can't really do many other things to this logo until we do what's called expanding our object. What that does when you click the expand button, and your object has to be selected for that to happen. If you've clicked off on the background and nothing is selected, there is no option to expand. You have to make sure your object is selected. When you click expand, instead of this thing being one solid image, which if we go to our layers palette really quickly, we have layers down here just like in Photoshop. You can see that in our layer, which is just, you know, our normal workspace, there is the tracing object image and there's the original logo. And that's it. They're just kind of sitting there in these layers. But once I actually expand this, the image that was the vector is now called a group, and there are several different objects inside of it. There's the bat. I can turn that on and off. There's the yellow around the outer edge, negative space. There's the ring, and there's the white around the outer edge of the whole image. There are basically now are 4 different objects inside of this group, which basically represents the entire object here, the entire image. So what you'll notice when you expand is that little blue lines start to show up around every single part of your image. So every kind of separate color in your logo is going to have a blue line around it. That's just showing you that they have been separated into their own separate little objects and are now separate from one another. So the thing is, with your direct select tool, the black tool, if you click anywhere inside of this and drag it around, it's going to move it just like it did before. It's going to move the entire group. If we want to hone in on a particular object that's inside of this logo, we have to use a different tool, which is the direct select tool. It's just the other selection tool, the white arrow. The thing is, right now, when I click on it, since the last thing I did was click on it with my selection tool, everything is still selected. So basically, if I try to move it, it's still going to be moving all at once because it's all selected. What you need to do is click off onto the background so that nothing is selected. Now you can select specific chunks of color from your logo. So now if I click on this white, I can move that separately. You can see it's like a separate thing that I can move around. It looks kind of weird because that white thing is behind the other logos, the other parts of the logo. So when I move it around, it looks kind of odd. But it is its own thing. I don't even need that white to be there. Like that was just the negative space all around my logo. So once I click and select on that, I'm just going to hit delete and get rid of it. Anything that's going on around the outer edge of your image that's just the negative space, why leave it there? It's just this object that you really aren't going to need. But now I can kind of click anywhere else. So here's the bat. I can click and move it away from everything else. Not that I want to do that right this second, but I technically could. I'm just going to back up. Notice also when I move this, it is on top of the other things. The bat is in front, and the yellow negative space there and the black ring are behind it. That's because that's just the order of them in my layers palette, just like in Photoshop. If the bat were dragged to the bottom of that layer, well, now it's behind everything else. So that's why that is happening. So anyway, I'm going to move that back up and get back to the way it was. I'm just going to back up until it's back in place. When you have the direct selection tool and you click on something, all of these little boxes show up. These are basically showing you what the anchors are. And anchors are basically what are delineating the shape of the object. So this bat has all of these tiny little anchor points around, and basically that is the anchor points are showing you sort of they're the connected the dots, I guess you could say. In between all of the anchors are what are called paths. They're just like lines that can be straight or curved, and they connect each anchor. So if I were to want to manipulate something, all of these anchors can be completely manipulated, and so can the paths. Let me zoom in and show you. So let's say I want to make the Batman ears super long, like I showed you at the beginning. Well, I'm going to click on an anchor. So if you mouse over it, it says anchor. If you mouse over a path, it says path. If you click on an anchor and let go, I'm just going to click one time. That selects that anchor, and now you can click and drag it into whichever direction you want to drag it. So I can basically stretch the ear out by doing that. Whenever you select an anchor, there are also what are called handles. And handles will allow you to adjust the curve of the path that connects the anchor that you've selected with the next closest anchor, which is like this one way down here. If I click on this, I can drag these handles like that, and basically make this whatever shape I want. I don't want to do that right now, but I technically could. I just want it to look like this. I'm going to do the same over here. So I'm going to zoom in because I can't really see what's going on here. So there's an anchor, and now I can drag that up as well. This one's really a little bit wonky because there are a couple of extra anchors in here. The tip of this Batman ear had a bunch of different anchors. It wasn't a a perfect point. So when I dragged that up, it didn't do exactly the same as the one over on the right. So I might actually have to click on this anchor and move that out a little bit to make that a little thicker. And I can kind of make these paths a little bit cleaner if I wanted to. But basically, this is going to allow me to change the shape of my object. So again, I can click here and drag it up even higher. And I can click here and drag it up even higher. I could come down here, which is what I did for the example, and I can click on the bottom anchor here and drag that longer. And maybe drag this over. I'm not looking for perfection here. I'm more looking for just some manipulation, I guess, of the of your logo. So now I have something like this going on, which is similar to what I showed you at the beginning, but the colors are still all exactly the same. So how do we change the colors? Well, if you notice with the direct selection tool, every time you click on a color, this color over at the bottom left here changes. So now it's yellow, now it's black. If I had the white around the outside, it would turn white if I were to click on that. This is what's called your fill color. We no longer have a foreground and background color like we did in Photoshop. We now have what's called a fill and a stroke color. The fill is the color that the object is filled with. The stroke would be an outline that we could put around the object. So if I wanted like a red outline here, I could change the stroke. I don't want to do that right now. But how do we change the colors of these things? Well, once they're selected, I can now go over here to my color guide, which is this looks like a little color palette here. You can drag it a little bit longer. And basically it's the Roy G. Biv spectrum from left to right. The top is lighter, the bottom is darker. And you can just kind of start clicking around, and it immediately changes the color of the object that is selected. And you can just keep doing it. Like if you don't like the color, you don't have to undo or anything like that. You can just keep doing it until you like it. There's really not an option in Photoshop that allows you to manipulate and change things like this quickly. It is a vector thing, and Photoshop can do vectors. It's just not really good at it. It's not what it's really meant for. So I could change this to whatever color I want. Now I could click on the yellow, and I could change that to whatever color I want. And I could click on the black, and of course change that to whatever color I want. And basically you can just keep doing that until you like the color of your logo. So that's basically it for this project. The idea is that you take a logo, a simple logo, you manipulate the shape of something in it in some way, and you manipulate all of the colors. And basically turn the logo into something that is completely different than how it started. So you're basically going to take this when you're done. You're just going to save it. So this is just it's just King Logo AI already. I just hit Command S, or it would be Control S on a PC, and there you have it. Your logo is now your image is now ready to go. You have your regular photograph on the left, your modified logo on the right. And again, this is just dipping our toes into Illustrator, and we're going to be getting into some higher levels of manipulation here soon.